Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. So welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and apologies for that little interlude. We're just talking and shooting the breeze. Welcoming to the podcast today, coming in from New York, and this is probably a man who doesn't like sleeping because he's just told me he's come back to the gym from the gym, and it's 11:43 p.m. in New York right now. Mr. Ted Santos, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And if it were Saturday evening here, I would be saying live from New York, and it's Saturday night, right? I screwed it up, huh?
Saturday
Take two.
Take two. Well, thankfully, this is we're not streaming live, but everything we talk about actually goes up on the podcast, maybe except the little pre-introductions we just when we press record. Ted, very, very much looking forward to this. You are the president at Turnaround Investment Partners, and have a long established career in business transformation, working with organizations, working with leaders and CEOs. But you're also sharing with me just before you press record that you were a sales trainer back in your day. So as I said, I showed you the list of questions that I was going to ask you, which is the blank sheet of paper. And for those of you who listen regularly, you know that we shoot off the hip and we just grip it and rip it. Always like to establish a little bit of foundation, Ted, and that is, let's delve into your background a little bit.
Sure.
In terms of what you started doing, but really interested in how you've evolved into doing what you do today in terms of working with organizations, particularly around disruptive leadership.
Okay. So yes, as you said, I was a sales trainer, and it was for me personally, the sales training was great because it was more of the psychology of sales, and there was a huge emphasis on dealing with acrimonious prospects. You know, how do you deal with that difficult person and be able to turn that around? And here I have a company, Turnaround Investment Partners, right? So how do you turn around a sale with someone who's giving you a difficult time? So there are all kinds of things like NLP and bonding, and for anyone that doesn't know, I assume salespeople do. NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, and so it's like a language unto itself. You know, people are visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and you speak at a cadence what they are. So you're bonding with the person, and there were so many different ways that we were bonding, and in some ways, there were, because of the psychology of sales, you would sometimes disrupt the flow of a difficult person to kind of get them on your side by bonding and saying something that's kind of unpredictable. So it was a great experience for me, and I took that from being a sales trainer. I worked as a salesman. I was hired as a salesman for a transportation company. And the president of the company would meet with myself and the other salesmen every week. And every week I would say, "Hey, Mike," and that was the president's name, "Mike, if you move this person here and you put this structure in the organization, if you did this every week," I was making some new suggestion. Yeah. And one day he said, "You know what? I'm sick of you telling me how to run my company. Do you think you can run this company better than me?" And I was like, "Yes." And he chuckled, and he was like, "You're serious?" He said, "Okay, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you do that." Wow. And just as a side, it was a smart move on his part, because even though he was the president, he was no longer at the helm of the ship. Every day he was in operations making the tough decisions. First, it was, intermittently. Then it became, he came in first thing in the morning and went straight to operations. And he was working like an operations person, making all the tough decisions. So then the operations people kind of like, well, Mike will make it, and if it's a bad decision, we'll lose a client. It's his fault, not ours. And if it's a good decision, okay. So he said, "You have 30 days to run this company." And if you can't do better than me, I don't want to hear another word about how I should run my business. Deal. So I said, you have to do one thing. You have to tell everyone that I'm in charge and you have to stay out of my way. Go into your office.
Yeah.
And so he told everyone, he went in, and in 2 weeks, he said, I don't need 30 days. This is your job. What do I pay you now? So one of the things that I was telling you was my sales training was really important for me because there were some things culturally that had to transform in that organization.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was a big thing is when we made an error for a client, instead of calling them and saying, hey, we messed up and here's how we're fixing it,
Yeah.
the operations people would be sitting around laughing and joking, saying, guess what lie I told, they'd be thinking of some lie and, they'd kind of be colluding. Yeah, well, tell them this, or this worked for me.
Oh.
And I said, hey, now we're going to tell the truth. When you make a mistake, you're the one who calls the client
Mm,
and you are going to tell them how we're going to resolve it.
mm.
And one of the women said, ha ha. And then you woke up because we'll be out of business just like that. It's never going to work. I said, no, no, that's what we're going to do. And so she said, well, what if this happens? What? So as a sales trainer, I'm accustomed to role playing all the time. So they now want to role play with me. And it's like, I'm trained for this. So I role played
Bring it on.
and, and she said, you know what? You want me to do it? I'll do it. I said, hey, if it doesn't work, I'm responsible. So she said, I'll do it. And a few days later, she said, hey, just want to let you know it worked. But next time, this might happen. So she wanted to role play with me again. She said, okay, I'll try that. And these things were working. They were now telling the truth, and no one wanted to be the one to make the calls. So they now got their act together. And I also really raised the bar on accountability
Yeah.
because I knew we made promises to clients, and that's it. There's no gray area. This is the promise. If we don't exceed that, my commitment is we exceed it. But first, we need to just be on point.
Mm,
So the role playing with them and being a sales trainer dealing with acrimonious customers, they were giving me the operations people were now giving me pushback like a difficult prospect. So I had plenty of training to deal with that and role playing with people. So, but it also because I was you know I had a high skill for role playing, I could help them with the problems they were having with customers. So basically, they would give me their problem customer
yeah.
and role play it with me, and I gave them ways to deal with it. And when it worked, after a while, they just didn't even doubt me anymore. They had full cooperation with me, and they would let me know, hey, I'm having this problem. What's a
Yeah.
way to handle it? So then I started just asking questions instead of giving them solutions so that they could rethink. So you talk about disruption, and I didn't know this is what I was doing at the time. I was disrupting the normal way that they think about solving problems. For them,
Mm,
they used to go to the president and say, have a problem. He give them an answer.
yeah.
I would just ask questions. And now they're like, but where's the answer? You're asking me questions. So then after me doing that for a while, they'd come to me and say, I have a problem. And I know you're going to ask me this list of questions. I already thought about them. And here's where I'm stuck. So the disruption was, oh, it was working. So
Yeah.
now they're thinking through. And then it went to the point where they didn't even come to me anymore. They just said, hey, 2 weeks ago, had this big problem. This is how I resolved it and blah, blah. So in some way, you could say I made myself obsolete. So I even disrupted myself.
Yeah.
I disrupted my role, which was now obsolete and no longer needed, unless it was really something extreme.
Mm,
Uh, and even the woman said, "Hey, we're going to be out of business." There were times where she would say, "I need your support for this," and I would actually speak to the customer in front of them so that they could see how I solve it.
hmm.
And now you have sort of a blueprint, a
Yeah.
script for how to deal with these things. So I could stay out of it. And what that allowed me to do is to go find some new services and new products, new things we can do for customers that we've never done. so that I can disrupt the whole operations team. But I didn't know I was doing it. That's just the way I kind of thought. Like I was always thinking, how can technology make us obsolete? What are the things that we can do
Yeah.
now to get ahead of technology?
Yeah.
So I'd go speak to customers, and customers are really good at telling you things, even though they don't know how to ask for the service.
Mm.
You just have to have really good relationships with them.
Yeah.
And that's salespeople, I think, are in the best position to do that. Even me as a salesperson, it's like, hey, let's go have lunch. Tell me what's going on in your business. How are we doing, first of all?
Yeah.
What's going on? What changes are you guys dealing with? And that always gave me, as a salesperson, another way to look at their business, and
Mm.
then go back to the operations. As just a salesperson, now I have to go back to the president and the operations and say, hey, I think there's some possibility with a customer. So if salespeople are not intentionally doing that as a way to service their clients and find new revenue, so they may be leaving money on the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you look back on that, Ted, the fact that because that would have taken some courage to go to the owner of the company or the executive and say, I reckon I can run this better or make suggestions. Did your level of curiosity and I guess, for want of a better term, passion for innovation and disruption come from anything specific, or was that just something you had, do you think, when you look back on it?
Are you familiar with the Japanese sword and how well made the Japanese sword is?
As in the samurai sword?
Yes, it's supposed to be
Uh,
one of the best swords in the world.
well, so much so that when you drop a silk cloth on it, it just splits.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that may look elegant, but what it takes to make that sword, you have to take, iron ore, and they say it's fold. You have to fold it, so melt the iron ore down, and you beat it with a hammer and fold it, and then you straighten it out a little, and then fold it again and beat it. So that's what life did to me.
Folded.
I was beaten with the hammer over and over again, and I learned about disruption that way.
And now you're a samurai.
uh, so the first one that really taught me about disruption and high performance was seeing my mother run with two broken legs, and I didn't know that. It was a car accident.
Run.
Yeah, yeah, yep. So we were about 100 meters from home. Maybe it was it was she took her children to her New Year's Eve party at her mother's house, and so she's coming home, I don't know what time in the morning, some ungodly hour, and then she
Yeah.
falls asleep 100 meters from home, and the car is wrapped around a tree. I'm 6 years old. I'm the oldest of my, at the time, three siblings. And so, my nose was broken. I still have a scar here. My knee was like, I was in a hospital for a bit.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I was tall enough to look over the dashboard, and I saw my mother run. And by six, I had a lot of experience in life. I had seen much in life. I had seen my mother run in the past, and I saw her run like I had always seen her run.
Yeah.
And she runs home, and my father was home with his cousin. So they come out, get us, take us to everyone to the hospital. And at the hospital is where I learned she had two broken legs and a broken arm. And so at 6, I'm thinking, what do human beings have in them that we don't know how to pull out?
Yeah.
So I start researching, you find these stories about the woman lifting the car off of her daughter and going into burning house. You just all kinds of stories that
Yeah.
are inexplicable to the
Yeah.
normal human biology. Uh, so at 9, I started studying human behavior, and that's what gave me a huge advantage as an executive, to really have a great understanding about human beings and how to pull more out of them than what they know how to get out of themselves. Also, as an athlete, I broke all kinds of records because I had this run with broken legs,
Yeah.
performing well beyond what you think. And then at 21, I received a phone call that both my parents were dead. So there's the sword, the hammer beating me again. And now there are 4 children. I'm the oldest, and I take over the family. And what I learned about leadership was invaluable leading in chaos. I had to coach my siblings up. I had to delegate. So these are all great things. But what I noticed is here's my mother in extreme situation, unfortunate, uh, and she performs
Mm.
like in a way that normally people wouldn't. And then
Yeah.
my parents die, and I watch my siblings do things that this isn't normal, right? So I'm seeing a pattern under extreme situations.
Yeah.
I lived in Acapulco, Mexico for about 2 years, and I was there for their worst hurricane in history. And I watched how resilient people were and how people came together from a natural disaster. And I can tell you, it was the worst scene I've ever. Uh, I live in New Jersey, so I was able to see the Twin Towers from where I lived. So I
Mm.
was also here for that. So there's another disaster.
Mm.
So I watch how people come together. And so it's the pattern. So I'm starting to see patterns in my life where disruption brings the best out in people. So I created a methodology that somewhat simulates disruption, but it's a mindset
Yep.
simulation. So it's to transform mindset. So when I was running that transportation company as a COO, I had no idea I was disrupting them. I didn't know I was transforming corporate culture. I didn't. I was just doing what was in the best interest of everyone. What's in the best interest of the customers, of the guys who own the company, they're the investors, um, and then for my people so that they have an easier job. And somehow I want to get paid
Mm.
in all of this. So I have to do what's best for me too. But everyone needs to benefit from what I'm doing. And I knew that I wanted to not be mired in the day to day problem solving. So I
Mm.
wanted to go out and find new opportunities and didn't know those opportunities were disruptive, except I watched people embrace them like yeah we'll do this. I like this. So it's people like doing something new, something different. So with all those things, those patterns, I said there's something to disrupting people
Yeah.
and getting them to make these quantum leaps. And so I'll stop there. I was thinking of an example, but you may have a question, so let me stop there.
It's I mean I'm just I'm happy to let you just keep talking because that's it's phenomenal because there's a number of points there, Ted, and one of the biggest lessons for me, and it's something I try to get to leaders to understand as well as this concept of selflessness. And you made the reference to you didn't quite call it redundant, but you said I think you said the word was obsolete. You made yourself
Right,
obsolete
right,
because what you'd done is you'd actually be able to create an environment where you taught your team within the operations and logistics business resourcefulness. And that
right,
was not teaching them in a classroom per se, but teaching them through the examples that you set, the questions that you asked, the
right,
expectations that you drove, and
right.
the standards that you drove to the point where they now were more independent of thought and self-sufficient to the
Exactly.
point that they're the ones that were going to take the business forward. Um, and the other thing you mentioned there is that you're doing the right thing by the company, you're doing the right thing by the people, you're doing the right thing by the customers, and you're doing the right thing by yourself.
Right.
Unfortunately, and I love your take on this with all the organizations you work with. Unfortunately, what I see is there's a number of leaders within organizations that unfortunately place too much emphasis on self
Mm.
and not enough emphasis on others in order to drive high performing cultures.
Wow. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I think it's Procter and Gamble that has sort of a mantra that says the customers are first, the employees are second, and the shareholders are third. If we take care of the customers, then they will pay for our products, which pays for our employees, and that takes care of the shareholders.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. So looking back in terms of disruption, because you've created the disruptive leadership model, which I'd love to delve
Right.
into. Um, there's a lot of lessons that you've learned. I mean, what's such a powerful lesson from your mum in relation to what she did and I guess the protection that she had and the responsibility she felt to protect her kids in that particular environment.
Right.
Um, looking now at disruptive environments, because you do talk about the fact that we don't want to just be solving problems. We want to be able to create problems so we can drive innovation. What are some things that are key to that in relation to the disruptive leadership model? What are some key elements or pillars of that people can grab hold of and maybe start to create disruption in their own businesses, but also potentially in the industries that they work in?
So, uh, one of the things that hurts people is the presuppositions. Like we already know what we can and can't do. The sort of simple example is when the guy Roger Bannister in 1956 ran the mile. He was the first one to run the mile under 4 minutes,
Yeah.
and before that, it was humanly impossible. So he had to rethink his training. He had to rethink the mile, how he paced himself, and he could no longer, in a way, he had to unlearn a what was considered a scientific fact that it was humanly impossible.
Mm,
So there are lots of things to unlearn, and if you look at most disruption, it comes from outside. It comes from companies outside of your industry
mm,
because they are not mired in the presuppositions you have. I probably overuse Apple Computer and making the iPod. Sony, there's no reason Sony didn't make it, but Sony seemed to be married to the Walkman and the Discman,
yeah.
and they never saw the disruption coming. Um, but there are lots of beliefs that we have and they go sort of unchecked. So maybe a good idea is for people to sort of test, kind of poke and prod. Uh, do you know why automobile motorized vehicles had a top speed of 40 miles an hour? Let's the early 1900s. Do you know why?
No, I can only assume that it was about the speed of a horse at full gallop.
Yeah, probably right. Right. So they believed, and I guess the science community said it was a fact.
Yeah.
I don't know how they proved it, but they said if a woman travels in a vehicle going greater than 40 miles an hour, her uterus will explode.
Well, that's probably similar to the Roger Bannister story, where scientists believe that if you run a certain distance and a certain speed, your heart's going to blow up.
Right. So, so there are there are conversations. So let's say there was a whole conversation around, well, we're going to make a car. Just make sure it doesn't go over to 40. We have to take care of our women. We can't have their uteruses exploding. And Roger, Bannister, hey, buddy, your heart's going to explode. So just hold it at 4 minutes flat. We're only saying this for your own good, you know?
Mm,
And imagine the world record now is 3 minutes, 43 seconds.
yeah.
Imagine that, you know? So, um, but there are so many things that we believe are the facts of life. You can look at Copernicus saying that the earth is not the center of the universe and that he was
Yeah.
executed for that. So we think that we don't do that any longer. There are possibilities. So, in two ways. So, your own capacity as a salesperson, as an executive, um, even if you look at salespeople, a lot of times they make great leaders because they're selling people on a vision.
Mm,
Um, and they have that capacity already on how to effectively communicate and get their thoughts across.
mm.
So there may be some salespeople who don't think that's ever possible, but I went from being a salesman to almost a dare. You think you can run this business better than me? Sure, buddy. Go ahead. Ha
Yeah,
ha ha.
go.
Let's see it. Let's see you do it. Right. Um, uh, so whether you're there are things that you think you can't possibly say. And I'm not saying being crude to people, but sometimes you're disrupting the normal flow of the sales process
Mm,
or the normal way of what you're selling,
mm.
so you never know what value people are going to get. So it's really important to not just limit yourself to what everyone else is doing and believing.
Yeah. And when you talk about disruption, I often, I don't always use the word disruption, but I often use, and this comes from NLP as well. I do the pattern interrupt. So what's the pattern interrupt that people are not
Right.
expecting because they're playing the same record over and over again.
Exactly.
But if I interrupt the pattern, they can't run the same strategy. So that can
Exactly.
happen as an individual, but it can also happen as an organization. So what are the patterns that we're running that's delivering the results, and how can we now change that pattern so potentially we can deliver a different result?
Right. Do you guys have sacred cows in Australia in
Yes,
businesses? Right.
yes.
So there are lots of sacred cows in companies. There are these unspoken policies. You just can't do this, and you can't. I worked for a company once, and the salespeople and the president uh, told me that I was selling the same service as everyone else, but slightly higher price, and they tried to convince me that I couldn't do that.
Okay.
Imagine the president of a company saying, "Hey, man, you can't do that." And the other salesperson, I mean, you can kind of understand why the salespeople would do it. Hey, they've got to defend why
Mm,
they can't do that.
yeah.
But my value proposition to the customer was me as a salesman. I'm not just selling you this. It's the how I engage you once we're servicing you. You're
Mm,
paying for an elite customer relationship with me. And
yeah.
but I never had to say that. It was what I presented and the way I
Mm.
presented myself that I was able to actually sell it at a higher price than my colleagues. So
It's
that was a
fascinating.
pattern disrupt for them, and they resisted it. How can you do this? In another one, I ran a translations of foreign languages, and when I arrived, I was once again a chief operating officer, and I completely trashed their marketing plan.
Yeah.
And the majority of our clients were law firms translating into patent laws, intellectual property.
Hmm.
And so I said, well, we're advertising in import export magazines. We're doing like none of that stuff is working. In fact, if you're an import exporter, you always hire someone who speaks the language, and there are very few translators. Why are we paying all this money? Trashing everything.
Mm,
Um, and we're going to now advertise in the National Law Journal. And the president said, why are we doing this? I said, because we have a lot of customers there, and they law
mm,
firms. They give us sometimes documents, and sometimes they give us boxes of documents, all to be translated. That's a lot.
yeah.
That's great revenue. He said, so you're smarter than the rest of us, and the rest of us are just too dumb to know to do this. And you have the right idea, and we don't. And I'm still new here.
Yeah.
I didn't say yes, but I just said, well, and so uh, in the first ad, we got a client that paid for the whole ad. But it was I disrupted, and at that point I didn't see myself, and I had a close buddy was saying, "Hey man, you're a change agent," and I was like,
Yeah.
"No, I'm not. I'm just some guy who comes in and does his job, and I take care of my stakeholders." He's
Yeah.
like, "No, you're a change agent, and that's going to be a problem because people don't like that." Which leads me to another thing that could be very helpful for people. The conversation that we live in on planet Earth is change is hard. And
Mm,
that's no different than believing a woman's uterus will burst in a car going 40 miles an hour. Change is hard if you keep telling yourself change
mm,
is hard because it's really not. I mean,
mm.
it takes 7 years for every cell in your body to change. So bi- biologically we are designed for change, right? People
Yes.
change their clothes every day. They don't wear the same clothes. Some people wouldn't be caught wearing. And look
Yeah.
at women have 200 pairs of shoes in the U.S. They don't want to wear the same pair of shoes twice in a year. So th- we do lots of things that support that we can do it, but as long as people keep saying it's hard, they
Mm,
will look for evidence to be right about that. So these are some examples of things that you can unlearn.
mm,
And so when I work with clients, before we start talking about breakthroughs and putting in strategies to execute them, I first want to work with them to unlearn many
mm,
of the conversations or beliefs they inherited and they believe these are the facts of life.
Yeah.
and there's nothing we can do about it. So that's the absolute first step, is to uh, reverse engineer a lot of beliefs that you have, and be able to dismantle that to go forward. And I can now, and I'll give you an example. And this, it's great because this guy was a salesman, but
Mm.
originally he was a CPA, and he worked for a large CPA firm and decided to change careers, and he went to go sell mortgages, and
Yeah.
he was doing okay. And to add to that, he was 62 years old, and they say you can't teach old dogs new tricks. So, not call him an old dog, but he was older than most people in the workforce,
Yes.
and so he now was in a slump. So uh, he reaches out to me. We work together. The end of the end of the story goes, in the first 3 months he doubled his productivity. In the next 3 months he doubled that. So if he started out doing a unit of two, after 3 months he was doing four, and then in 6 months he was doing eight.
Mm.
So this is a guy who is in such a bad slump that every day he went to work wondering if they would fire him today. He was waiting to be fired. And before those 6 months, now when they called him into the office, it wasn't to fire him. They said, "Hey, buddy, what do you need? We will give you whatever support you need. Do you need an assistant? Do you need this and it?" So, now he's 62 and he's king of the hill now. And he had three of his competitors courting him. So, what hurt him, and it was a blind spot, is this guy was sort of the master icebreaker. When you
Okay.
meet him, no one could not like him. Like, he had what people would say to be a good salesman. He was
Yeah.
charismatic. He knew
Yeah.
what to say. He'd get everyone laughing. They kind of let their walls down, and they liked him, and they're ready to do business. Well, that was his only gear. He would then make another joke, and he just kept breaking ice. He would talk a little business and then make another joke, and the people would leave the room liking him, but they didn't do business with him.
Yeah.
So what we uncovered together was that when he was 13 years old, he was hanging out with older guys. He was in the car. These guys were 17, 18, driving cars. He's in the back seat, and someone says, "Hey, what's this guy doing with us? Like, how old are you?" And he cracked a joke, and they all laughed. And they
Ah.
put their arm around him and said, "Oh, you're cool, man. That's why you're with us."
Yeah.
So he was able to hang. So the way he survived in an environment where he didn't belong was to be the funny guy
Mm.
and make everyone like him. And it worked. That was his superpower. So here he is, 62 years old, still using that. And he doesn't know it's from that incident. He
Mm.
thinks this is just who I am. And when people say, "Hey, this is just who I am. I've always been this way."
Yeah.
There are things that you do that they become your strength, and at the same time they are your weakness. They hurt you.
Yeah.
So once he could distinguish that, he we also made strategies for selling, and formulated great questions so that he could understand the needs of people and close
Mm.
deals. So I never suggested he get rid of his ability to be the icebreaker. You still want that. You just don't want to be stuck with it. So what do you do now? You're going to
Mm.
move the customer forward. And so that, you could say, that was a pattern disrupt, because the way
Mm.
he always did things, as a CPA, maybe that would work, right? You're
Yeah.
meeting with a client, and you don't have to sell them anything. Someone else did that, and you make the client comfortable discussing
Mm.
money with you. But now, as a salesman, that's just not enough. What worked for you in one profession may not work for you in
Mm.
another. Like, people say, what got you here won't get you there.
Which is fascinating. And the end of the story, I mean, he's doubled his productivity and his outcome over a period of a couple of months.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and by the way, he did get a better offer from a competitor, and he did switch companies.
Isn't that interesting that you talk about presuppositions and belief systems that often are ingrained in us when we're younger that we then carry into adulthood, into roles, into relationships,
Oh,
and we
yes,
don't necessarily question that. We just think, well, this is just who I am, right?
exactly.
One of the big things that I learned through and I did a lot of NLP training as well, is to get good at asking questions to try to understand what is the pattern and what is the strategy that you employ to do anything. And often I'll work with teams and I'll just use a simple example like cleaning your teeth, right?
Right,
And try to elicit a strategy that most people use when they clean their teeth to demonstrate that the vast majority of things we do are habitual, that we do things
right,
unconsciously. But when you bring conscious awareness to it, you can now unpack it. And we say, well, if you can change one element of that strategy, you can actually do something different and potentially get a different result. So if you can do that with such as cleaning your teeth, driving to work each day, getting dressed, right?
right,
Putting a watch
right,
on the opposite wrist, then you
right,
can do that with something that quote unquote matters, such as running a sales campaign or
right,
building a company strategy or a blue ocean strategy or something like that.
right. Yeah. Great book, by the way.
Mm.
Great book. Um, so one of the things when I used to sell print advertising, and one of the things that I did that was, I'll say unique to myself, is I lived in Washington, D.C. at the time, and there's a town that borders Washington. It's in Maryland. It's called Silver Spring, Maryland. And back in the 40s, it used to be the number two shopping district in the U.S. behind New York City.
Okay.
And now it was a ghost town. So, uh, so how do I get people in this place to advertise in this newspaper? So we had a photographer. I said, I want you to take a picture of this block,
Yeah.
and then I want you to make silhouettes of all of them, and then I'm going to take it to each store on that block and say, "This is I need you to buy ad. I'm going to do a full centerfold, and I'm going to lay this out, and the whole block is going to advertise." So I was instead of chasing that one off, I just would kind of go wholesale. I would go to a whole like mall or a business, a business park and try to get the whole place to advertise and put it. So then I could sell full page ads as opposed to selling, these quarter page or less, So, but it was a sort of a pattern disrupt, and it was just me being innovative. How do I get to sell larger ads and make
Mm.
bigger money, and it make it easier for myself because I'll get everyone wants to do it. Look at your neighbor's doing it. You're not, I mean, I didn't say that, but
Bit of
and
FOMO there, Ted.
right, exactly. So it maybe, perhaps, maybe I could do a pattern disrupt with you if you're okay
Mm.
with that.
Mm. Oh, with me?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So you've said several times that uh, you wondered if I had a passion for change or passion for something, right?
Yeah.
So I have a question because that's a huge buzzword here in the U.S. Go for your passions, do what you're passionate, and I have no passion for anything.
You have no passion for it.
No, I never go around talking about passion ever. So now I have a question.
Yeah.
Um, you have a choice of two relationships, and these women are equal across the board in looks and smarts and everything. But I'm telling you up front, in one relationship, it's going to be really passionate, highly passionate, and in the other one, it's going to be highly committed. Which one are you taking?
You think, can I? I can't say both.
Well, in some countries they do have polygamy, and you can have both. But I assume in Australia that's not a choice.
No, it's not. It's not. Committed.
So why do people talk about being passionate because when the rubber meets the road and you ask people what they really choose, they choose commitment.
Yeah.
So I'm highly committed to what I
Yeah.
do. but I'm
Yeah.
not passionate
Yeah.
because I can tell you passion usually feels good. And,
Yes.
Usain Bolt is a guy who, he holds the world record for running the 100, right?
Usain Bolt.
What,
Because
what
yeah.
that exactly, yeah. So, but when you read about when he trains,
Yeah.
this guy is training so hard he vomits sometimes.
Yeah.
That's not passion
No.
because that's when it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger won Mr. Universe 7 times, and he can tell you about days that he trained so hard he vomited. When people train like that, this is not. Oh man, I'm so passionate about this. I feel so good about. Maybe I don't want to do this anymore. This doesn't feel good, man. It's not supposed to feel like this. I don't like this. And people usually jump ship if it gets too hard. So it's
Yeah.
and if you want to master something, there's a guy, Malcolm Gladwell. Do you guys
Yeah.
read about him? So
Yeah.
he has a book, Outliers, and he talks about when you practice 10,000 hours, you master your craft.
Mm,
So, mastering your craft and getting 10,000 hours in, I can assure you there are going to be days where it just doesn't feel so good. I mean, I just,
mm,
like you said, I just came back from the gym. I can
yeah.
tell you there's some exercises I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? But then, you look in the mirror, you say, oh, okay, okay. But
That's why.
but it doesn't always feel good.
No, it doesn't. It
When I'm
doesn't.
doing that, but it's my commitment. So for me, I have a huge commitment to health. Perhaps for Usain Bolt, he was committed to breaking world records.
Mm,
Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted to break records for being Mr. Universe, more than anyone else. So that's a big part of my training also. So one is unlearning a lot of these presuppositions, and
mm,
then it's really solidifying and getting clear about what you're committed to and in the future you're declaring for yourself.
mm,
So a lot of times what we want to do is take the past and put it in the future and do the we want to do the past more, better, or different. I'll do it a little better, a little different. I'll do
mm,
more of what I've done. But I'm training people to actually create a future from the future, not from the past.
mm,
And so as you're unlearning a lot of these blind spots, it frees you up to see things that perhaps were always there, but they were hidden in plain sight. And so being committed, this is not about being passionate. I once had a guy, and talk about pattern disrupt. Uh, Part of his engagement with me was to read a sales training book. And he was like, yeah, yeah, I'll read it. Yeah. And so we'd meet every 2 weeks, say, what chapter are you on? Oh, I didn't get to read it. Oh, I read it this week. Yeah, I did read it this week. Oh, but I'm a little
mm,
behind. I said, hi, let me see your book.
mm,
I walked over to the trash can and I slammed it in the trash can. He said, "What are you doing? That's my book." I said, "No. If you're not going to read it, leave it there because that's
mm,
where it belongs, in
mhm.
the trash. You're not going to read it. Like you're not even committed to this. You're just yeah." And he got his book out the trash can. I said, "Leave it. Just leave it there." And he said, "No, you can't. This is my book." And I said, well, if you're not going to read it, you just be honest and tell me you're not going to
Yeah.
read it. He said, I promise I'll read the book, man. I'll read it. Just don't throw it in the trash anymore. And he read the book. Every time we met, where are you? I read it. And so I could talk to him about it because he actually read it.
Yeah.
But so that was a real pattern disrupt. I mean, I don't do that to everyone, but
No, no.
that was for him to disrupt what he was, normally already, we just kind of go with the flow.
So I love that commitment over passion. What if you are passionate? Because passion, I mean, because people say, well, if you love what you do, you'll find a way to get good at it. But it's just, and because sometimes kids are told just follow your passion, right? But
Right.
if you follow your passion, you might be really bad at soccer or basketball or whatever the case might be. You might love it, but you may not necessarily get good at it. And so, from the work that you do, is there, and it might sound like a ridiculous question, is there a part to play for passion to be included in that as part of longevity, or at least to get you started? And at what point does commitment take over? Because obviously, commitment gives you the longer term, um, I guess, vision or creation of that future, which is the future pace, as you're talking about. But
Right.
but is passion partly the rocket fuel that potentially can start that process, or is it a case of no, no, you just need to be committed from day one?
Uh, if you're going to be vomiting when you train, you're not going to be passionate about that. If that if that's what comes with the territory, how are you going to be passionate about that?
We might be passionate about the outcome, but you know that's the price you have to pay through the commitment in order to realize that future. So looking back, you might, so for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger might say, and I read a number of his books, right? He was passionate about getting out of Austria and going to the US, and he wanted to be the Mr. Olympia, movie star, politician, etc. Right? So you could argue that he was passionate in those three areas, but there's a difference, as we've just talked about, between passion and commitment. Are you prepared to do what is required to get to that position, get to the responsibility that comes with that? But retrospectively looking back, could you say from somebody like Schwarzenegger, because of his commitment, the passion grew with that commitment, even though he might have been thrown up and even though it might have been painful, but that was part of the passion because that drove the commitment?
If there is passion, it comes when you win. You're holding that trophy in your hand. Uh, and he won Mr. Olympia 7 times.
Yeah.
So he may have been passionate holding the trophy, but he was back in the gym
Mm,
all over again. So uh, here's the challenge, and this is what's so great about my work is that uh, when you train people to create paradigm shifts, when you train organizations to shift paradigms,
yeah.
there's a language that comes with it. And so most people who are high performers can't really tell you how they get there. What they
Yes.
do is they explain it to you in the language you will understand.
Yeah.
But if they spoke to you the way they think, it will not make sense. So if you look at the car having a top speed of 40 miles an hour, there was a conversation that said a woman's uterus will explode. That
Mm,
conversation shaped the actions of people who made automobiles or even
mm,
trains. You can't, and imagine, we send people into outer space, and to get out of the Earth's gravitational pull, you have to go over 17,000 miles an hour.
yeah.
And there are women who've gone up there and no one's reported their uterus exploded. So, but imagine if no one ever pushed the boundaries on that to see, well, what if we go 45? What if we do
Mm,
50? Like, maybe that was like the guys with Columbus waiting to fall off the edge of the earth, the flat earth, right? So,
mm,
this is risky if we're
yeah.
going to go these speeds. But if we didn't do like Roger Bannister and run the mile under 4 minutes, the mile wouldn't be 3:43, and we wouldn't be sending uh, uh, rockets out with humans into outer space because we'd still be like 40 miles an hour. The Wright brothers would have made the plane and it'd be 40 miles an hour. And I don't know how many people you can put on a 40-mile-an-hour plane, but
Not
you know,
many
right,
wouldn't take off the
exactly.
ground.
Exactly. So eh, there's a guy named Jean-Paul Sartre. He's a French philosopher, and he said, once people believe something, they go out of their way to prove what they believe is right. So
Mm.
once people believe that you have to be passionate, they're trying to find a way to, well, what if we could, you know, what if I could have both women? How about that? How about I do some genetic engineering and make a third woman who has both of them? I'm going to put that. So, but I asked you a really straight question. Like
Mm.
when the rubber meets the road, what are you going to choose? And you chose commitment.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Sony Walkman. They did focus group,
Mm.
and the focus group was the Walkman was always in one color, black, like Henry Ford's Model T. Well, now they had a yellow one, and they made a focus group, and they asked people, "Hey, which one do you think people would choose? The black one, or the yellow one?" And most people said, "Oh, people are gonna want that yellow one. Yeah, yeah, that's really, oh, that looks so attractive." And they asked them a bunch of other questions, and they said, "Hey, we just want to thank you for your participation. Everyone gets a Walkman, but you only get one. The table on the right has a black one. The table on the left has a yellow one. And which one did they most people take?"
I reckon the black one.
Yeah, exactly. So they all said people want to buy the yellow one, and when it was free, they took the black one.
So why is that psychologically?
Well, there's we often say things, right, that we think people want to hear. We've heard things over and over again, like just like the Earth is the center of the universe. It was
Yeah.
never true, but people heard it over and over, and they just believed that's
Mm.
a fact of life. So,
Mm.
um, and look, most people think they're pretty smart, and no one wants to think that I fell for something that's not actually true. So,
Mm.
so the Earth is the center of the universe. I'm no dummy. I went to Cambridge, and they taught us that the Earth. I paid a lot of money to go there, and I learned the Earth is the center of the universe. You can't
Yeah.
tell me anything different. I have to defend that.
Yeah.
Uh, so they told us you want to be passionate about things. When I saw my mother run with broken legs, that had nothing to do with passion. She was committed to getting children out of the
Yeah.
car. So
Yeah.
when you ask people who are high performers, what did it take, and they write a book and they
Mm.
use the language that people can relate to, it does the it does the reader a disservice because it cheats you from understanding what it really took to get there.
Mm.
And there are distinctions in language. There's a
Mm.
language for people in that to perform that way, and they don't always know how to tell you. And sometimes it will be so abstract that it's like, oh, there's nothing fun about that. How do I do that? So how does Michael Jordan say, hey, I was passionate about basketball. They cut me from the team when I was a junior, and I knew if I wanted to play as a senior, I had to train in a way no one had ever trained.
Yeah.
That's a commitment. I committed to that.
It
And
is.
and and I'm committing not only, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm not only committing that I'm going to be a star, I'm going to the NBA and I'm going to break records. How do
Mm.
you train for that? There's a guy who trains to make it to the NBA, and then there's the guy who trains to break every record. That's a
Totally
commitment.
different. Totally different. And
Yeah.
you see that all the time, whether in any sort of sport, because talent is not going to be enough to outwork hard work.
Well, so going back to Malcolm Gladwell, right? 10,000 hours.
Mm.
Did you put the time? So, if you and I went to a exhibition of martial artists, and we went with another guy who's a master martial artist, you and I are going to see guys fighting. We
Mm.
know they're doing martial arts, but the
Mm.
guy who's the master at it, he's going to say, "Oh, that guy's doing Jeet Kune Do, and that guy is doing Bando, and now there's another guy doing Aikido." So he has distinctions for
Yeah,
those. We just see an undifferentiated mass of fighting. But we have
that's
the
it.
distinction of martial arts. We see the
Mm.
kicks going, right? Uh, but we don't know which martial art they are doing, but the master does. He has distinctions that others don't. So when people master their craft, that's one of the things that happen. They have distinctions for what they're doing. A guy playing football in Australia, not US football, soccer, football in Australia, the guy who's mastered it, he can see openings where he can dribble that ball and get the ball downfield to do what he wants to do or
That's it.
pass it. So
Mm.
then the average person won't see that, he just flipped the ball behind his back. Like, what did he just do? But he he trained for that. He
Yeah.
mastered it, but he saw an opening for that to happen. And, you
Mm.
know, great managers do that. They see openings for where they can empower their people to do things they've never done. And salespeople can do the same when they're talking to prospects,
Yeah.
and have a great value proposition for them.
And it comes down, as you say, the commitment, but also creating the future from the future, not creating the future from the past. So, love
Yes.
it. So as we wrap this up, I'm conscious of time. Ted, you probably got to go to the gym again. It's 12:38 a.m.
It's closed. Gym is
Well,
closed.
welcome. What do I say? Welcome to Wednesday.
Oh, yes. And I was asking you, how is Wednesday? You said it was
Wednesday
pretty
is
good.
fine.
So I'm looking
Wednesday
for,
is good.
oh, I'm actually already there, I guess. I'm
Yeah,
in
you've
Wednesday
just you've
already.
just arrived
Yeah.
in
I've
Wednesday.
arrived.
You're 38 minutes into the new day.
Yes, I am.
So when people are listening to this and they're a sales leader, or they're a CEO, they're a COO, there's some sort of executive trying to create step change within their organization. If you can leave us with like a parting gift or a parting philosophy or a parting piece of guidance for people to at least start that paradigm shift, what would that be?
It's a good question. So, I think one of the challenges is that we look for silver bullets and we look for the three easy steps. If you just follow these three easy steps, and it's going to be, you know, you're going to hit nirvana. Uh, I'm not throwing that away, but I'm saying it really, you have to do the work. And
Mm,
um, training your mindset. You know, we have all kinds of camp for basketball, for hockey, for football, and we don't have a mindset camp. So regardless of your position, if you want to break through, uh, and reach a level that you normally haven't, maybe it's a good idea to get someone on the outside. You know, a good coach for an Olympic athlete can
mm,
see things that you don't see, and support your performance. uh, so I would say, do that. Find someone who can support you, whether it's in your company or outside of it, and commit to learning something that you didn't know.
mm.
And so, and like I gave you the guy who was selling mortgages.
Yeah,
What he didn't know was the 13-year-old in him was running the show. So
yeah.
I, I haven't seen anyone who escaped that. You know, Ivy League education, in their 50s, CEO. I've so uh, help yourself unlearn, whether you get someone to take you on that journey of transformation, but that next performance of uh, your own performance, that next level is just beyond what you're able to do. And to break through that, uh, usually takes someone on outside of you to help you.
Mm.
So look within your organization, look without it. I assume someone like you could train people to do that. And
Definitely.
someone like me, I'm not a sales trainer anymore, but you know, I
Yeah,
work in the executive levels,
yeah.
or organizationally. But there are people who can help you, and that possibility is just beyond your reach, and getting to it is usually, what's impeding you is a blind spot, and it's something you just don't know.
Love it. Love it. And add to that a commitment to move forward and take a step in that direction is
Absolutely.
is a key
Uh,
thing. So Ted, hey, really appreciate you jumping on the podcast. For people who want to know more about you and to connect with you, where's the
sure.
best place for them to do that?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Ted Santos, or you can go to my website, which is turnaroundip.com. And IP is like intellectual property.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I'll
Or,
make sure I put those on the
and you and I didn't talk about this, or you can find my book on Amazon. Uh,
the
I
book.
have,
I did neglect to mention you're an author.
yes,
Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Here's why you can't buy love.
that is correct.
That's
So
the book.
my methodology and people uncovering blind spots and creating breakthroughs, what I did is I transferred that methodology to something most people can relate to, which is intimate relationships.
Yeah.
So, people have blind spots in relationships. Here in the US, we have like a 53% divorce rate, and that has all kinds of consequences in corporate America. But I wrote it on a subject that most people would be able to relate to, but it really is about unlearning,
Mm.
and the book takes the reader through a journey of transformation. So it's on Amazon. If you guys have Barnes and Noble in your country, but around the world, Barnes and Noble, you can get it on their website or in their brick and mortar stores.
Brilliant. I'll put that in their show notes as well. Mate, absolute pleasure, and thank you for spending some time on the podcast after the gym, albeit early in the morning your time. But greatly appreciate you being on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast, Ted.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks. Actually, I had a lot of fun doing this, so thanks for
Excellent.
inviting me.
Yeah, greatly appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.